But back to the big reshuffle in the opposition today. Now, perhaps the most important promotion, the most significant, was of Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. She is now the Coalition spokesman on Indigenous Australians, and she joins me now. Jacinta Price, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations. What is the big thing that you want to achieve in this job?
Well, I think first and foremost is to ensure that we secure the no vote in this referendum going forward so that we can protect our country from dismantling the democracy that currently exists, and then, of course, look at how we can better serve our marginalised Indigenous Australians by focusing on certainly where that gap exists, where those marginalised people live in this country, that are in prominence, as opposed to certainly this idea that I think has been the narrative that's gone on for so long, that suggests that all Aboriginal people are disadvantaged inherently because of our race, which is simply not true. My focus will be on ensuring that we support those who are most marginalised, who are often overlooked, who are often not listened to because of language barriers in terms of culture. That's really where I want to be able to focus.
Now, just tell us, a lot of people know that you were Deputy Mayor, for instance, of Alice Springs. You had a business, you're married, you have children. But just going back further, your mother, Bess Price, what a great woman. She comes from one of the last tribes to live in a traditional way out bush. Your father, Dave, on the other side, is a white man, a former teacher, top bloke. Has that affected the way you see race relations in this country, looking at your own family?
Well, most definitely, Andrew. Growing up in a place like Alice Springs, having a Warlpiri mother and a white Australian father, that was my normal. And it was the normal for a lot of kids that I grew up with. So, the idea of race wasn't something we were too concerned with, because as a community, we tended to get on with one another. I had, a traditional Aboriginal family on my Warlpiri side, and not just Warlpiri, but, Aranda, Arnangu, Tiwi. I've been very much engaged with many communities growing up throughout my life. And my dad's family from Newcastle, New South Wales, a white Australian family, and both very loving families that I grew up with. And that to me was what being Australian was, coming from those two different backgrounds. And really this divide is a new concept as far as I'm concerned. And I really don't like it. I know the community that I, come from doesn't like it. Certainly in the Northern Territory, I feel like we're the sort of final frontier where we all just generally want to get on with one another, but are falsely sort of framed as, a bunch of redneck white fellas and victimised Aboriginal people, where there's, so far from the truth. And so for me, it's just sort of normal. And, now I've got a Scottish husband. Our children, we've got a blended family. So our children, on my stepson and my sons, all have Mauritian in them. They've got both sides have got Mauritian grandmothers as well. And it's what it means to be Australian, to come from a number of many different backgrounds and yet belong to this wonderful nation that we have. And that's what really drives me, is that love that I've grown up with, and continue to want to create and share and certainly create understanding, which is something that I did with my parents as well when we had our own family businesses as cross-cultural educators and trainers in that space, because it was all about creating understanding for the benefit of workplaces, communities and families.
Honestly, when you put it like that, of course, it's going to be absolutely ludicrous 100 years from now to still be, because of the Constitution, picking out one race among this whole melange when we're all going to be, more or less, let me put it politely, we're all going to be mongrels. I mean, it's like expecting Britons to still be wondering whether someone's a true Anglo-Saxon or true Celt or a Norman invader. I mean, it's just so stupid. Now, one of the things, though, that has terrified many people, many white people particularly, about saying no to the Voice, Labor's planned Aboriginal-only advisory parliament, is that they're going to be called racist. Now, already you see the Liberals and Nationals being called racist. Will the decision to promote you and Karen Little, who's another opponent of The Voice, do you think that's going to change that cheap debating tactic at all?
Well, you'd hope so, because it just makes people making those accusations come across as ludicrous, really, clutching at straws. And if all they've got to do is call names, well, they don't actually have an argument. If they can't debate the point, if they can't promote this concept as something that is going to benefit all of Australia, if they can't guarantee that it's going to provide the outcomes that they claim it's going to, they don't have a leg to stand on. And of course, both myself and Karen have been involved in and understood the ins and outs of the Aboriginal industry. We know what this means. We know that there are those that are seeking a transfer of power through constitutional, through making these constitutional amendments with the Labor's Canberra Voice proposition, and we won't stand for it. And we're also representative of the many, many Aboriginal voices out there who don't agree with this proposal. You can't call all of those people racist. We just can't keep throwing around this ridiculous word. It's lost its meaning as a result, and there's no doubt that racism
I think a lot of people are still intimidated by it. Yeah, a lot of people are still intimidated by it. That's why Lydia Thorpe uses it like a machine gun. Racist, 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 racist. I mean, but that said, I got to say, you've come under such vicious personal attack yourself, and for a long time. I've covered on the show for years now what you've had to endure. Just today, for instance, Rachel Withers of the Left Wing Monthly asked for her Twitter trolls, believe this or not, to send in examples of you saying awful things that she could smash you in an article. Although when you read the article late this afternoon, she came up empty. You apparently haven't said enough bad things. I've said it many times how tough you are, Jacinta. I've said it to your face. But I thought last week it finally did get to you a bit. I thought, you betrayed some emotion there. How did it get to you? And are you up for the longer fight, given how nasty it is?
Yeah, look, what got to me is understanding that there are those that are suffering, that are in a worse position than I am. And I guess I felt a sense of frustration because it's really their voices that I've always tried to fight to amplify. And it can be really frustrating to try to get, particularly a Prime Minister, the ABC, for example, to actually take these issues seriously. And, an issue that is as serious as child sexual abuse, instead of actually focusing on the issue, doing some due diligence, the ABC, and recognising the truth with regard to the extraordinary rates in the Indigenous community, they try to turn it around and turn it into a Jacinta Price and Peter Dutton bashing exercise. And
it's ridiculous.
When you've lived with these truths all your life, it was just a moment where it just that sense of frustration and knowing that I've been fighting for so long, it took hold of me in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was concerned. I wonder sometimes whether you take on too many fights because it's superhuman what you're doing. Just quickly, I'm out of time, but I've got to ask you this because both you and Karen Little today raised it at your press conference. A phenomenon that's fascinated me for years. I mean, for me, it's the ultimate colonisation. You've had whites not just colonising the land, but now whites colonising Aboriginal identity, claiming to be Aborigines themselves. It's extraordinary. There's Melbourne University's Professor Bruce Pascoe, of course, complete fake. There's former Labor candidate Lauren O'Dwyer, who couldn't or wouldn't explain why her family tree didn't have a single Aboriginal ancestor. And South Australia's Attorney-General, Kyle Maher, who refuses to explain why all his own ancestors in his genealogy are from Europe and won't tell us who his mother's supposed Aboriginal ancestor is. Now, why is this issue of identity important in the context of The Voice?
Well, because there's this idea that somehow, what the government is trying to push is this concept that we're inherently disadvantaged because of our race. So everyone's got skin in the game. Whereas my argument has always been not all of us are disadvantaged because we have Indigenous heritage or are just Indigenous, but those that are the most marginalised in this nation are mostly nothing but Indigenous in this country. And so they're often, their voices are those that are disregarded, drowned out, and you see a lot of exploitation of them. You also see a lot of reinvention of culture. And when you've grown up in a traditional cultural context, you can see the difference. But there are many who are prepared to exploit that because, of course, we've got an industry that's built on the misery, on the backs of the most marginalised, who are predominantly just Indigenous. And that's where the focus should be. And if we did that, then I think we'd have less of this opportunists ticking a box and claiming that they're something that they're not, and we could get on with the job of dealing with real disadvantage in this country.
Well, Jacinta, there's a mountain of work ahead of all of us, really, and particularly you. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for your time.